focus. The US military has now announced that it has struck a suspected drug vessel in international waters in the Caribbean Sea, killing 3 people. The military action was the latest of more than a dozen US strikes since September on vessels near the Venezuelan coast and more recently in the eastern Pacific Ocean that have killed more than 60 people. Hegseth has now, in fact, informed that the vessel was operated by a designated terrorist organization but provided no further information. His post included a 20-second video clip marked unclassified of a boat in the water that gets struck by ammunition and explodes. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us from Taipei in Taiwan. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us on NewsX World today. Yet another strike has taken place in this very critical operation. The United States, of course, looking at reducing the amount of drugs that flow in from countries, particularly in Latin America. We're now learning that with this latest strike, the death toll has risen to 70. Secretary Hegseth has in fact released footage of the strike. We can see the boat being set on fire over there. I wanted to understand from you, there are a lot of analysts that have criticized the US's action, stating that this is just an ostensible motive for targeting these drug traffickers, and there is more at play over here as well. This, of course, they've pointed out to Donald Trump's statements authorizing CIA operations. They've stated that the US is trying to carry out a regime change in Venezuela, although the United States has publicly denied wanting to do so. What, in your assessment, is happening? Do you concur with what these analysts have had to say, or do you have a counterpoint to make?
I think a key point at the moment is that the Trump administration, President Trump himself, his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and other national security officials, such as Secretary of State / National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, they're fully on board with proceeding with these attacks on boats that are transporting drugs from Latin America into the United States. So whatever international criticism or domestic criticism, and certainly there is domestic criticism in the United States, including by Democratic members of Congress and a small number of Republican members of Congress. But again, the key point here is that the administration believes this is a necessary measure. They believe they have the legal justification as well. And they're going to continue doing this. How long? We don't know. But you mentioned that this began in September, so now it's over 6 weeks. And the tempo continues, and arguably it's going to increase. So we're going to see several of these hits a week, most likely. And that's the plan for the Trump administration. And I think at some point they will have to demonstrate to the American public in more detail why they are doing this and why it is working, why it's successful. With regard to Venezuela and the possibility of regime change, that's getting a lot of speculation at the moment, but we do have to keep in mind that the Trump administration has been very clear, mostly when talking about the Middle East, but I think broadly around the world as well, that they're not in the business of regime change. So they might implement a very wide range of actions to put pressure on the Maduro regime in Venezuela. But is the United States actually going to support an armed rebellion or send troops ashore to fight on the ground? As of now, I would say that remains highly unlikely.
That's something even Donald Trump has pointed out. He has ruled out sending boots on the ground. I requested to stay on with us. You've spoken, of course, about criticism within the United States of America as well. We're now learning that US Senate Republicans have in fact blocked a resolution that would have prevented President Trump from attacking Venezuela without congressional authorization. This comes a day after administration officials told lawmakers that Washington is not currently planning strikes on Venezuelan territory. The Senate voted 51 to 49, largely along party lines, against a measure that would have brought the war powers resolution, up for a vote. Only 2 of Trump's fellow Republicans joined Democrats in backing the measure and show of the party's support for Trump's military buildup in the southern Caribbean after 2 months of deadly strikes against boats of Venezuela. Now, the Trump administration says that since early September, US forces have launched at least 17 strikes against such vessels in the Pacific and Southern Caribbean, killing about 70 people. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold. Interesting numbers coming in, 51 to 49. We do know that the Republicans hold 53 seats, which has made the math very obvious that 2 Republicans voted against the party line. But all in all, if we look at this vote, this has in fact highlighted the sort of, the fact that this has taken place on partisan lines. The vote has occurred on partisan lines. How do you read into the stance of the Democrats?
One interesting thing about this vote is everybody showed up on both sides. All the Republicans and all the Democrats showed up, and that doesn't happen all the time. So it's an indication of how serious members of the United States Senate take this issue, and the Democrats looking to pass something to oppose the policy of the Trump administration. That resulted in all the Republicans showing up because they knew the Democrats were all going to show up to vote against the Trump administration. But it's clear that only a small minority, very small, only 2 Republicans voted with the Democrats. So most Republicans support this policy, and even if they have concerns about the policy, they're still going to give the administration an enormous amount of leeway when it comes to foreign policy and protecting the United States from drugs that are coming in from overseas. It's not an issue that Republicans are going to go to battle with the White House over, and we saw that with the result of the vote.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us. There are some other very critical developments we're tracking from within the United States of America. We're now learning that US President Donald Trump has issued a statement that his administration needs a Game 2 plan in case the US Supreme Court rules against the legality of his sweeping tariff policy. He's warned that an unfavorable ruling would be devastating for the country. This comes as the US Supreme Court is currently hearing arguments in a case that challenges the US President's authority to unilaterally impose a wide-ranging tariffs under a 1977 law that was intended for national emergencies. There have been debates in the United States signaling potential limits on executive power in trade matters. It's of course the US Congress that is authorized to pass resolutions on tariffs. Nevertheless, President Trump's position remains the same on the issue, and his lawyers have been arguing that the Constitution's Commerce Clause is complemented by the emergency law. Listen in to what Donald Trump had to say.
We thought we did very well yesterday. We hope that we did. I think it would be devastating for our country, but I also think that we'll have to develop a Game 2 plan. We'll see what happens. Most people tell me we did very well legally.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold. Interesting case. This has been shaping up for quite a while. There have been federal courts earlier that have ruled against Trump and his tariff policies. Now, of course, we do know that the Supreme Court has a 6-3 conservative majority. 6 of the judges have been appointed by Republican presidents, 3 by Democrats. How do you think the Supreme Court, will it vote on this particular line, or will it consider the arguments that have been made as far as the interpretation of the Constitution is concerned?
The questions from some of the conservative judges indicate that they have skepticism over the Trump administration's interpretation of the law. Some of the questions were extremely tough, and many people are starting to speculate that there could be at least 2 of the conservative judges will vote with the 3 liberal judges and invalidate the policy of the Trump administration, and specifically the Trump administration's interpretation of a section of a law that the Trump administration has cited as the legal basis for the tariffs that have been implemented this year. But I think it's very important to keep in mind, and this is what Trump was talking about when he said we need to have another plan, a plan B, a second plan. The administration will find other legal bases to impose higher tariffs. There are other U.S. laws and sections within laws that the administration could potentially cite as the legal basis for higher tariffs. So if the Supreme Court eventually does rule against the administration, I think we're not going to see an immediate reduction in tariffs. We're going to see the administration cite other sections of the law. And if the administration does that, then we'll be right back where we started, because people who oppose the policy will have to go back to the courts and get a ruling that the new citation is also incorrect. And also, the Trump administration is going to argue that we've reached these bilateral agreements with other countries. They've agreed to pay these tariff rates. So how could the courts tell us that we can't reach those agreements with other countries to collect tariffs at the rates that those countries have agreed to pay? So the Trump administration does not want to lose this case, but they definitely have a backup plan, and the likelihood of these tariffs going away is very small.
Indeed. And what else, if they do go away, and if the Trump administration will take recourse to something else, if SCOTUS rules against it, there will be an interim period in between when the tariffs will be null and void. What do you think would then happen?
Again, I think the likelihood of the tariffs being null and void is very small, because the Trump administration will find other legal bases to impose these higher tariffs. But one issue that is also getting a lot of focus, and the Supreme Court justices ask questions about this, is if they invalidate the tariffs that have been collected over the past few months, will the people who paid the tariffs, which is the importers, will they be entitled to refunds, and how would that be processed, because it involves billions of dollars, and we just don't know how the justices will rule on that. And again, that's assuming there is a majority that invalidates the tariffs. So certainly one thing to watch when the justices eventually rule is, will there be a refund of tariffs that have been paid?
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX.